Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. And I pray you are blessed wherever you are. And I'm thankful for every one of you that are joining us either on Facebook, Rumble, or we will be on YouTube this week, as we're not going to be hitting any of hopefully, none of the topics that cause some of the issues there. So thankfully, we have this opportunity to get together, and I pray you are all blessed and strengthened in your inner man wherever you are. This broadcast is to encourage you. And one of the things that we like to say around here, we want you to be informed, but not overwhelmed. And so it is very easy, especially with the headlines that you're seeing now in this hour, to get overwhelmed and to start to get a little over concerned with the things that are happening. And this is a reason why I believe Messiah told us in Matthew chapter 24 that these things would be coming and not to let our hearts be troubled. I believe that we need to be at our best in this hour. This is the moment for you to peak. So if you're looking back saying, boy, I haven't done very well and I really need to step up, here's some good news. You've got a wonderful opportunity coming up right now to really help and encourage your brothers and sisters in Messiah as we see the day approaching. And so just encourage each other. Don't shy away from your own brothers and sisters. This is a good moment to redouble your efforts. And it is easy to feel like you're less than. It's easy to feel like you're not measuring up and not keeping up. And so let this broadcast be an encouragement to you. You are forgiven of all the sins you've confessed and repented of. You are his chosen. Obviously, you're watching broadcasts like this because you want to be informed and on top of what's going on. And I believe Elohim wants to bless you. And so informing you of danger ahead of time is a form of great blessing. And how many know that information is like apples of gold, fitly spoken, are powerful things. And so we need those words that help us in this moment. And for those of you that are joining us for the first time or maybe new to our channel, we have a website called Remnant Watch. We were commanded to keep watch, and so we do. And we have a website called Remnant Watch where we will be posting the stories that we cover during this conversation, during this broadcast. And this is a great way for us to keep track. It is a service of love by Remnant House, and we do this so that there's a simple place for us to keep an eye on all the different things that we're going to talk about, not only today, but previous broadcasts as well. So you're able to go back and keep up on some of the things that we've already discussed getting to this point. And those of you that have been with us for a while, I've been keeping track on some of these things that are happening now. So you're really not surprised by world events. Nevertheless, again, we want you to be informed without being overwhelmed. One of the things that we found is that people were disconnecting completely from the news. That's an unhealthy thing to do. On the other hand, you can be overwhelmed and over-surfeited, if you will, by too much information such that you can't do your job. You can't do the thing you're assigned to do. You're so busy looking up at the news or looking up at the latest events that you can't be functional. This is not any good. This is just as bad as being underinformed. And so there has to be a balance. And we decided that this is the way we would do that on our weekly news update. And on that note, we're going to be hitting a few stories. So buckle up, Buttercup. Share the link. Encourage your brothers and sisters to join us because we've got some things to cover. And if you've been paying attention to the news, if you're not under a rock, then you know that the world is on the edge of war. And so this is going to be the theme for tonight's discussion. We're going to try and stay away from other controversial discussions and other things. And yes, I know. I don't know why that is. Let me see if I can fix that. Hang on a second, guys. I'm going to put you on a different screen. Please stand by. We're going to fix some technical difficulties here. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Every once in a while, we do have an issue. It does come up. Don't ask me why. I can't explain it. I can't explain a lot of things. Oh, but that I can explain. We went a little high on the old brightness. Hang on there, folks. I think we're going to be able to come back on here. All right, let's try that again. This time without the oops. That's better. All right, so we've gotten rid of the very bright tonight. It's not the kind of bright I want to be. I mean, we want to be bright, not that kind of bright. Okay. That was funny. I made it funny, made myself laugh. You know, you got to preach yourself happy sometimes. I mean, like my primo hermano and I, we used to sit up on the porch. We used to do this skit where we'd sit up on the porch and just talk about things and go, that's just wickedness and sin. Oh my goodness. Sometimes you just got to laugh, saints. You're just going to have no choice because otherwise they'll steal all your joy. Amen. We can't have that. Amen. And so let's start off on our top story tonight is China is watching the Middle East situation very closely. And again, those of you that are paying attention, again, on our broadcasts weekly, we've been watching China's changes, not only in their involvement in the Middle East, but also their activity in, of course, their own theater of operations with Taiwan and so forth. So this is a very interesting thing that China is injecting itself very quickly early on in the conflict here with Israel and Hamas. So I found that very interesting, and I found it to be telling. It's something unusual or a new thing or a new wrinkle in the ongoing saga that is the Middle East crises. Something that we've all of us that are aged have grown up listening to one after another reports about this type of conflict. And so we're all a little weary of it. China says Israel has gone too far. China's official news agency reported in a diplomatic conversation with Saudi Arabia. Now, remember, we've been watching this because, again, for the first time in history, we've got different players in the Middle East, and China is actively involved with Saudi Arabia. If you're, again, actively involved with Saudi Arabia to make this whole Middle East situation change. And China's foreign minister said Saturday that Israel has gone too far in responding to last week's invasion by Hamas. China's official news agency reported. Speaking to Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said Israel's actions have been extended beyond self-defense. According to Jingzhou, China has an interest in helping resolve the conflict and the underlying issues involving the Palestinian population. The report contained no direct quotes, but Jingzhou said about Wang's remarks during the phone conversation, China is in intensive communication with all parties to push for a ceasefire and an end to the fighting. So China is not thrilled. It's kind of interesting that China is injecting itself into this conflict because that doesn't lend to its own legal precedents for invading Taiwan. So that's kind of an interesting position for them to take. And maybe the saber rattling over Taiwan is a bit much ado about nothing. And as I've said, there's been a lot of effort to do that reunification with Taiwan peacefully. So this reflects the Chinese attitude and definitely is a different posture than the posturing that the Middle East is getting from the West. So that's a different position that that China is bringing in to the picture, and I think that's a brilliant piece of diplomacy, and frankly, I think that we've been watching this. We've been watching China sort of embarrass the West by just taking higher ground and looking for more peaceful answers. And we know from the scripture that there is the kings of the East that have to come across the dried riverbed of the Euphrates River, which now has dried up. So we now know that there is a definite confirmation here of the East, or the East's influence in the Middle East, and does this lay the groundwork for that 200 million man army that is going to come across that line, that river, the river Euphrates? Who knows? So we're going to have to keep an eye on this, but we certainly see a lot of attention, a lot of investment, a lot of activity going on in the Middle East that is in fact reflective of what the scripture tells us to look for. So something that we have to keep an eye on, something that we're going to continue to watch. But I do believe it is an interesting theatrical performance, if you will, when you're seeing the West having a totally different attitude than China and the Eastern countries. And I do believe that that's part of what's being, that's part of the conflict here, is the totally different approaches to this Middle East conflict. And these wrinkles are coming out in part because some of this information that is leaking out, well, it's not flattering to the Israeli government. And one of the things that we talked about last week, if you all remember, is I'm just not buying. And now a week later, I really am not buying. So if I was suspicious a week ago, as many of you were, well, then we're more suspicious now than we were then, because it is a huge, huge, huge issue that the most advanced security apparatus on earth, as far as we know, I mean, these are the people who sell security to other countries. So this is going to be bad for their branding. Okay. Nothing else. I mean, this is one of their main products from Israel, is security. So for them to say that they didn't know any of this and that they got caught by surprise is terrible for their branding, but ultimately unbelievable. And I believe that that's what's starting to manifest now. In fact, this was on X, formerly Twitter. Confirmed Netanyahu ordered an Israeli military, the Israeli military, to stand down for 7 hours during the Hamas invasion. I don't know if that's true, but there it is. It's sitting there, and it someone sat down with the Jewish charity leader Cecil Rootman, who received intel directly from her Israeli rabbi, and she quotes the rabbi in this video. You're welcome to look at it. Other top-level government sources, and of course, you know, there's some characterizations that may be unagreeable. But the bottom line is that what's been confirmed and what is coming out, I can't say it's been confirmed, but what is coming out is that they knew about this staged event. So all of you who were a little suspicious that this was just a little too organized and a little too, easily done, there's a lot of people that agree with you. So if you're suspicious, if you're one of those people that are going, things that make you go, well, then you're not alone, because apparently a lot of people are thinking the same thing that my primo hermano was thinking, that it's possibly a staged event. And was it set up to bring about some of the further things that we talked about? Remember, and some of you went and looked it up, the Albert Pike prophecy, where they foretell the Third World War, and they specifically say who they intend to make fight each other to utter exhaustion. Okay, so this is suspicious. At the very least, we need to be careful about that, and we need to take a look and take a step back, so we're not caught up in the manipulation. So again, this is one of the things about being overwhelmed. When you are caught up in the manipulation, you're overwhelmed. And how many can see people that get caught up in the stories as opposed to observing what's going on? That's the difference between being informed but not overwhelmed. You can be informed without it starting to turn you into something else, right? And in Israel, it says, if you're wide awake, there you go. If you're wide awake, don't feel alone and don't feel like you're by yourself, because according to the Jerusalem Post, even the Israeli population are asking some really hard questions right about now. Israelis, according to the Jerusalem Post, agree with our previous broadcast. They're blaming the government for Hamas's massacre and say Netanyahu must resign. So an overwhelming majority, 86% of respondents, wow, that's a pretty high number, including 79% of coalition supporters. So these are people that are actually in support of the government, said that surprise attack from Gaza is a failure of the country's leadership. That's a harsh statement. And hey, it's fair. You know, I think it's a reasonable thing for people to be very concerned about the security apparatus that they spend who knows how much money on, and force everyone through all kinds of security hoops to jump through. And then this happens. So that had a lot of effect on the population. 4 out of 5 Jewish Israelis believe the government and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are to blame for the mass infiltration of Hamas terrorists. So they're not blaming the terrorists. That's an interesting thing, don't you think, folks? Terrorists into Israel and massacre that followed. A new Dialogue Center poll released on Thursday found an overwhelming majority, 86% of respondents, including 79% of coalition supporters, said the surprise attack from Gaza is a failure of the country's leadership, while staggering 92% said the war is causing anxiety. Furthermore, almost all the respondents, 94%, believe the government must bear some responsibility for the lack of security preparedness that led to the assault, with over 75% saying the government holds most of the responsibility. Wow. And of course, you know, there's going to be the push by the opponents of the prime minister for his resignation. But I do think that it is not unreasonable for the people of a nation to expect that its security apparatus is going to respond a little faster than 7 hours to something as horrific as what turned out to be the most violent terrorist attack in Israeli history, I believe. So it is certainly something that was of grave concern. And I think that a lot of people are asking hard questions in this moment. Okay. And so, again, you have to ask the same questions that these folks are asking, because these are people living there. And if the people living there are looking not at the terrorists, but at their own government, that is suspicious as it gets. Okay. And especially given, again, the prophecies and expectations that, you know, many people have for there to be a conflagration right there in Israel. And so we're going to see more and more things that confirm what Messiah told us. Remember, wars and rumors of wars is part of this process. So this was not a short thing. We're on to World War III. We're talking now. The headlines are World War III, World War III. Well, that tells you we've been through 2 of these already. That were just as manipulated, just as many different events that, if you go back and look at the historical record, would make you shake your head as well at the news coming out then. So you're seeing some of the same manipulating factors in play today that we saw in previous world wars, and that obviously has a great number of people concerned. And again, this has the potential to spiral out of control. Israel is fending off aggression at the Lebanon border as it prepares its invasion of Gaza. And as you know, Hezbollah, which is directly supported by, well, both these factions appear to be supported by Iran. So we're not sure that's what they keep saying. They certainly are making this point. But Israeli defense forces are poised to begin a ground operation in Gaza against Hamas terrorists. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is carrying out attacks at Israel's northern border, and Iran is threatening to join the conflict. And here are some of the facts they want you to be aware of. Israel has declared war against Hamas after the terrorist group infiltrated the country on October 7th, firing thousands of rockets at residential areas and butchering civilians. At least 4,200 people have been killed in the war on both sides, including at least 1,400 Israeli civilians and soldiers, and 30 Americans have also been killed. So they wanted the Americans in this, and they got it. And so Palestinian health authorities say at least 2,808 Palestinians have been killed and more than 10,950 were wounded, and 13 American citizens are unaccounted for. So that means that they are likely hostages as well. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pledged to defeat Hamas and wipe them off the face of the earth in a speech during the swearing in of the national emergency government in Knesset. The attack was carried out in the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. According to, it actually was in the middle of the feast of Sukkot. According to Israeli reports, at least 1,500 Hamas terrorists were killed in Israel. They estimate that hundreds of terrorists are among the dead in Gaza. So now the latest thing that I heard was that they were basically saying that they were not going to turn on the water or the electricity or fuel. I believe it was fuel, electricity, and water going into the Gaza Strip has been suspended until all the hostages are returned. So they're holding the entire population of Gaza. They're punishing them in group or in mass for the actions of this Hamas. And there's a lot of people that have a opinion about that. And honestly, I don't know that that's righteous. Nevertheless, I do understand the seriousness of the situation that they're in. I mean, after all, if you are the family of the people that are held hostage, I'm pretty sure you want them to do anything they can. But there are innocent people on the other side. Okay. And so there are no, I mean, you can't just say all bad, all good. You've got innocent folks on the other side, just as worthy of protection, just as worthy of our support, if you will, as one side or the other. And this, we just can't be in this left-right paradigm as the remnant. We can't allow ourselves to get caught up in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They're both part of the same tree. And yes, the Palestinians are fatigued, and I think this doesn't help make them fatigued with the Hamases of the world. But I think they're just equally fatigued with the United States, and they're equally fatigued with the Israeli government, and they're equally fatigued with Egypt, that shares a border with southern Gaza and won't let a single one of those people into their country. I mean, given the circumstances, humanitarian situation as it is, you would think that at least there would be some type of refugee station created in the southern portion to give some relief. None of that is happening. So again, there's multiple, you can start shifting blame in a lot of different directions here. There's been no countries that have, swung the doors, other than Jordan, has swung the doors wide open for these refugees. And so again, it's one thing to say, this shouldn't be happening and what have you. It's another thing to come up with reasonable solutions for it that not only the players in the theater are going to cooperate with, but what about the peripheral? It's funny how these countries have an opinion, except when it comes to how to actually deal with these people that are going to be human. The refugees are just that. They are refugees, and they need whatever they're going to need. And so to just continue to confine them and then tell them they have to leave while bombing, I mean, it's beyond crazy. And if you can imagine yourself in that type of situation, then again, no matter what your political leanings are, no matter where this is just families and people. It's pretty crazy how it's starting to manifest. Okay. And so again, we're peacemakers, so we're always hoping for resolutions that bring about peace. And that is what we certainly are praying for and hoping for in this situation. And again, around the world, you're seeing a big reaction. This is coming out of, I believe, Great Britain, and tensions are rising. Flares and bottles thrown, and protesters clash with police at pro-Palestinian march in London. So, now that they've spread out all over the world, there are places where there are a lot of support for the Palestinians. And again, it'd be one thing if they could freely travel and they could just depart and say, okay, well, you don't want us here, we'll go over here. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So this does seem to be quite managed. Flares and bottles were thrown at police as tensions boiled over at a pro-Palestine march in London. Cops arrested 15 people as up to 50,000 demonstrators. Whoa, that's a big crowd. Took to the streets in cities across the UK on Saturday. So 50,000 people is like what you would see at like a football game, an American football game. All right. That's a lot of people. Can you imagine being the police trying to sort that and trying to keep people, behaving themselves? This is going to get out of control, folks. This is going to get out of control quickly. And now there's troops amassing at the border of Gaza. So this is the kind of stuff that's happening right now. And so they're ready to go in, and yet they're doing it under the threat that they will then be attacked by multiple countries. And that's what has been announced. Okay, so some countries like Iran have said, if you do this, we will retaliate, right? Well, there are other countries that may not have, announced their intentions. So this could get dicey quick in the next day or two as we watch. So we'll be paying attention with that. And in other news, so what did we talk about? We talked about whenever there is a major war effort, and we know that that is the case in Ukraine, right? So whenever there's a major war effort going on, this tends to provide cover for other military actions and other adventures. Okay, and so we know that one is covering for the other. So now, while you got everybody's eyes now going to be on the Middle East, then there's going to be other activity that you're going to see. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, how that North Korea was connecting with Russia, and we see this confirmation here. U.S. says North Korea delivered 1,000 containers. That's a lot of containers of equipment and munitions to Russia for the Ukraine war. And so there's a tightening up of the Russians and the North Koreans. The White House said on Friday that North Korea has delivered more than 1,000 containers of military equipment and munitions to Russia for its ongoing war in Ukraine. Speculation about a possible North Korean plan to refill Russia's munition stores drained in its protracted war with Ukraine flared last month when North Korean leader Kim Jong-un traveled to Russia to meet President Vladimir Putin and visit key military sites. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said that the U.S. believes Kim is seeking sophisticated Russian weapons technologies in return for the munitions to boost North Korea's military and nuclear program. So as I said back then, this was not going to be, and we figured that out, right, folks? This wasn't just their generous, support of Russia. There was a ulterior motive. And what's that ulterior motive? To get sophisticated weaponry. So yeah, we give you bullets, you give us, guided missiles. Okay, and they have plans and designs on attacks of the United States. On the United States, they've threatened the United States, as we've talked about multiple times. So North Korea getting potential earth-shattering weaponry or assistance from a major nuclear war power, that's news. Okay, that's something that we need to be aware of. So the stage is being set for multiple area conflagrations. And again, as we've said, and this whole broadcast is pretty much dedicated to this topic because it is the now news. It is what we're dealing with now. It is what I believe the sign in the heavens portends I believe that we are on the earth and our adversary is coming down with great wrath. He's running out of time. He's at a short time. And Iran back Hezbollah terror group now fully prepared. Look at this. They're fully prepared to join the war against Israel. So as soon as Israel starts attacking Hamas, it's a very high likelihood that there will be a two-front war almost immediately. Okay, and so I don't know that there's going to be a whistle or a horn or something that says go. I think this is just going to start, and this is going to get ugly quick. The U.S. troops are on alert for Iran's allies joining the Israel-Hamas war. So, of course, it's not just those countries that have already said something. As I said, there's the potential for other countries to jump in. U.S. troops stationed across the Middle East are on the lookout for Iran's regional network of allied militias, potentially opening new fronts in the most serious flare-up of Israeli-Palestinian violences in decades. We are monitoring across the region for any indicators or warnings that these groups would consider piling on or entering this conflict in a way that escalates it, a spokesman for U.S. Central Command told Newsweek. This is why, according to the spokesman, we adjust our posture. One day after the surprise land, air, and sea attack led by the Palestinian Hamas movement against Israel on Saturday, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced new military moves designed to bolster regional deterrence efforts. So they're hoping that by a show of strength, they're going to be able to keep this entire episode contained. I guess we're going to watch and see if that's in fact the case. Right now, we've got back channel communication going through the UN that is indicating that Iran, again, is not playing. They have flat said Iran warns Israel through the UN against a ground offensive in Gaza, the very thing that the UN is planning, or that Israel is planning on doing. They're specifically warning them. Iran sent a message to Israel on Saturday stressing that it does not want further escalation in the Hamas-Israel war, but that it will have to intervene if the Israeli operation in Gaza continues. Two diplomatic sources with knowledge of the situation told Axios. And so what's going on here? Well, we're being kind of warned now that this is going to not only increase in hostility, but expand into a broader war. And these are the kind of narrative drops we would expect to see as they sort of lay the groundwork for what they plan to do. I mean, after all, they do telegraph what they're going to do. And so Iran is trying to continue to expand that and to include the region because the numbers favor the Arab countries, of course, in terms of sheer numbers of soldiers and what have you. But in terms of getting them on a righteous cause. So what you're seeing is an attempt to take what's called the high ground here. And they're all trying to pretend that they have the high moral ground. And so, of course, Hamas is using, the words occupation and things like that to justify what it did. And Israel, of course, is using the images and all of that to justify this action. So there's this constant sort of jockeying for the high ground. And I don't believe either one of them have high ground. I believe that there are atrocities going on both sides. And we need our king to return. Come on, somebody, help me here. And so it's getting much more serious, though. And that's something that we watch from the 10,000-foot view. We watch the trends. And we watch the chatter. We watch the words they use and the way that they try to frame stories and share things. And that's how we pick up what's going on. Iran is trying to deploy weapons in Syria. Okay, so that's within shooting distance to open up a new war front, Israeli officials are saying. And now this seems to be 5 times a year they target Syria. So, I mean, it's just ongoing. A senior Israeli official has alleged that Iran has been trying to deploy weapons in Syria to target Israel in the northern part, opening a new war front as the conflict with Hamas intensifies in southern Israel. In response to a post on X, which stated the Iranian regime is attempting to transport strategic weapons to or through Syria, Joshua Zarka, the head of strategic affairs for Israel's foreign minister, affirmed the Iranians, are. So this was done by an Israeli official, is confirming that in fact the Iranians are trying to move military hardware, into the theater of operations, if you will. And America is committed, folks. So those of you that are here with us in the West, the United States has already been committed into this fight. And that means that we then, as a nation, or our interests, become a reasonable target for counterattack, for retaliation, or for terrorism down the road, right? So these are all reasons for us to be heightened in our awareness, aware of our surroundings, and take nothing for granted. And according to this report right here, the U.S. will likely go to war in Israel with air and naval power if Syria or Iran become actively involved, a retired 4-star general says. So if somebody jumps in the fight, the U.S. has committed to jumping in the fight, which would most likely mean other countries are going to jump in the fight. Are you seeing this, folks? The U.S. will probably go to war in Israel if other countries get involved. So they're telling everybody, hey, we'll jump in if you jump in. Retired General Barry McAfee said that the U.S. was keeping a close eye on the countries such as Iran and Syria. You might want to keep a close eye on a few other countries too. They're not the only ones in that theater of operation and that have a vested financial interest in the outcome. So this is about to get dicey, and it's going to happen quick. And we saw that the Serbians and we saw conflict starting to erupt there. So again, taking advantage of the world's attention elsewhere, what happens? Other conflicts start to emerge. We are going to turn our attention to Africa soon. We haven't yet, but Africa may take up an entire broadcast just as we deal with some of the conflicts that have been erupting on the African continent as they push back against hegemonistic and imperial powers as they see them, controlling the natural resources of the continent of Africa. So we're going to keep seeing these regional effects, and that may be the plan as well, to cause regional conflicts that sort of blend into a major international conflict. And again, I keep thinking back to the prophetic words given not only to the United States, but to other parts of the world. And it does not portend well for the days to come. Blinkin warned lawmakers in Azerbaijan that Azerbaijan may invade Armenia in the coming weeks. So again, taking advantage of this theater of operation. He also said state isn't planning to renew a long-standing waiver that allows the U.S. to provide military assistance to Baku. Secretary of State Anthony Blinkin warned a small group of lawmakers last week that his departure is tracking the possibility that, or his department is tracking the possibility that Azerbaijan could soon invade Armenia, according to two people familiar with the conversation. The call indicates the depth of concern in the administration about Azerbaijan's operations against a breakaway region in the west of the country and the possibility of conflict spreading. And so again, something that we have to be not naive about, right? So we have to be a people that are aware that if conflict is going to erupt seemingly everywhere, there is no center. And one of the things about war is there's sometimes nobody says it's over. So it goes on and on. It can go on for a long period of time. And again, every nation has potential risks, but those that are definitely involved, for example, the United States, we've certainly opened ourselves up as a country to retaliatory attacks. And in fact, Hezbollah issues a threat to Israel and to the U.S. as the Hamas war escalates. And so we're going to see some retaliation. The Lebanese Lebanese militant group Hezbollah issued a threat to Israel and the United States on Sunday, which was yesterday, suggesting that it could get further involved in support of Hamas as the war escalates. So again, these are all threats that keep coming out, and these are all part of things that we've been watching for some time. So as it unfolds, we've got to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. As I said, things may get dicey in the fall. We talked about this during the summer. We may see travel restrictions if this starts to get out of control. You might see that it's difficult to move about the country. Pray that your flight be not in winter, nor on the Sabbath day. And it's a reality, folks. And again, this is the kind of stuff that's being warned. And when we see these headlines, they're telegraphing, right? So we know that a lot of times they're not really that concerned about us. What are they doing? They're letting you know what's going to be happening. FBI director warns of a rise in terror threats against Americans, potential copycat attacks on U.S. soil. You knew this was going to attract my attention because this is a forecasting headline. So they're telling people ahead of time to be on the lookout for this. The head of the FBI is ominously warning there's a rising number of terror threats against the U.S. and that the biggest concern involves the potential lone wolves pulling off Hamas copycat attacks here, which is reasonable. I mean, people do get ideas from other crazy spreads, right? Agency Chief Christopher Wray urged law enforcement to be extra cautious about ripple effects from raging Israeli-Palestinian conflict during an address at the International Association of Chiefs of Police annual conference in San Diego on this last Shabbat. And so they're echoing some of the same concerns, and I think reasonably so. So it's a good thing that people are aware. And the U.S. has bigger problems. Not only do we have this now potential connection, so we're involved or engaged in Ukraine. Okay, we're also involved or engaged around Taiwan, right? We're also involved and engaged in various parts of Africa. We're definitely involved and engaged in the Middle East. And lo and behold, there's bad things happening right on our own back door, right? And so this warning report came out. U.S. must be ready for simultaneous wars with China and Russia, according to a commission. Congressional reviews of U.S. strategic posture says security environment has worsened and U.S. needs to respond. And honestly, I do believe there's a massive internal effort to weaken the United States so that it can be conquered. The word that I got in 2014 is that it would be neutralized. I think it's almost there now. So, we definitely are in a difficult spot right now. This is it. This is it, folks. It doesn't get much, it almost doesn't get a much more, suspenseful, like sort of the calm before the storm. That's where we are right now. And Israel is not even waiting. Israel has already attacked 2 of the main airports. They're out of service after Israeli strikes. So Israel is making sure that there's not a airport for Syria to use. Israel strikes knocked out Syria's 2 main airports out of service on Thursday, Syrian state media said. And the first such attack since a weekend Hamas onslaught on Israel triggered fierce fighting. So they're doing that. I think that's preemptive. So they've already struck the Damascus and northern city Aleppo, both of which are controlled by the government of war-torn Syria. They destroyed the landing strips. And again, you can read the entire story on Remnant Watch, of course. But what is that telling us? They're ahead of it. And they are anticipating, other efforts. So they're bringing in a floating landing zone in the form of an aircraft carrier. So that gives them an advantage in terms of planes and air superiority while attacking their ability, other countries' ability to get planes in the air. So, what are they getting ready for, folks? Here we go. This is it. And at the same time, they're still going to continue their efforts in their Eastern European efforts, because they're keeping pressure on Russia. I wonder if they didn't want to keep Russia occupied while they pulled this off. This is very interesting. The U.S. is announcing new military aid for Ukraine as obstacles mount. I'm not sure who Ukraine's going to get to man these new weapons, though. They're losing people like crazy. This is behind a paywall, folks, but you should know that the U.S. has announced new military aid for Ukraine. So they're continuing this ruse, what I think is a fake war. I'm wondering if it isn't some elaborate scheme to just funnel money where they want it to go. But it is interesting that we're finding reports that a lot of the weapons that went to Ukraine ended up on the black market and ended up down in the Middle East. See how this is getting nuts? So, keeping track of all this in the days and weeks and months to come is going to be impossible. It's a good thing you're ahead of it. It's a good thing you knew it was coming before it happened, so that it doesn't catch you by surprise. You are not children of the dark, that these things should catch you by surprise. You are children of the light. And the last story I wanted to cover tonight is a health concern, and this does cover in the western part of the United States. And this indicates to me just a tremendous amount of internal collapse. And it's a reflection of the infrastructure of the United States really, really coming apart in a way that we really didn't anticipate. And for those of you that are not familiar, Lake Mead is a very critical lake that feeds Arizona and I believe Southern California as well. But it's certainly a huge, huge water source for the Southwest United States. And Lake Mead officials have begun to warn now because of the results that have occurred of rare but deadly brain-eating amoeba found present in the hot springs. So this is a Lake Mead report. Officials warn Lake Mead visitors about a deadly brain-eating amoeba found in the hot springs. Again, this is coming out. Officials in Nevada are warning visitors of a brain-eating amoeba with near 100% infection fatality rate present at Lake Mead. So first of all, don't go swimming in Lake Mead. Okay, so I mean, let's start with that. Lake Mead National Recreation Area said Neglari floweri, I don't know how to pronounce that, popularly known as brain-eating amoeba, has been found in hot springs at the hot springs below the Hoover Dam. Oh no, below the Hoover Dam. So guys, just again, if you didn't live in there, if you don't live in Arizona, if you don't live Southwest United States, you don't know how critical this is. If that water's contaminated with a brain-eating amoeba, if that water's contaminated, that is the only water source for a huge number of people in the Southwest United States. So when I saw the story, just like, oh, by the way, just FYI, I just wanted to let you know this. There's brain-eating amoeba in Lake Mead water that is piped into all the houses in Phoenix, right? And I mean, they've been slowly letting us know that the water is very suspicious, but it is really becoming clear now, more than ever before. And so again, and this isn't easy to replace. This is a huge issue in Arizona. The thought that they would have to try to figure out a way to mitigate this problem and mitigate the lack of water. Remember, Lake Mead was dropping such that they thought they were going to have to shut down pulling water from Lake Mead to supply people. And they were, in fact, turning off water at certain neighborhoods. If you remember, there was one in north of Scottsdale, I believe, that we covered back in early spring, where they shut the water off to all the residents because it was that tight. So this is the only water source that comes into that to this area in terms of mass provision for the public. And there's a brain-eating amoeba. I wonder how motivated you think they're going to be to remove all contaminants from the water. So far, no municipality has demonstrated the fortitude and will to fix their municipal water supplies. I haven't heard of a single one that has mitigated its, found that they had a problem and then mitigated it. In other words, fixed it. And the reason why I believe it's next to impossible to do that is once that water supply is contaminated, you not only contaminated the water at its source, so here in the case of Lake Mead, but now you got all these miles and miles and hundreds of miles of pipe. So imagine a contaminant goes through the water and you say, oh, we stopped it here. Yeah, but now you got all this pipe with all this material in it. And that water has to pass through there to get to your house, to get to the homes in Arizona, in Southern California, in Nevada, and so forth, right? So it means that the problem isn't gone. Even if you cleaned it up at the source, it still needs to travel through those pipes. So the only place that you can actually effectively remedy this is at point of use. And I don't see any efforts to remedy at point of use other than the homeowners themselves doing what they can with whatever products are on the open market. But there's no municipal answer. There's no solution being proposed by any municipality. And as far as I know, there's still lead in the water in Flint, Michigan. So, just because we know about something doesn't automatically mean that they mitigate it. So I would strongly recommend anyone living in any way dependent upon this water to begin immediate pursuit of mitigation of that water before bathing children in it. Because again, if it's the same water and it's carrying the same bacteria and the same things, well, this can happen downstream, and we can wait for it, or you can get ahead of it. So I'm just letting you know ahead of time that everyone that gets their water from Lake Mead now needs to be a little more careful. And it's not like you can say, hey, there's an amoeba in the water. It's not something you can see. So again, that's why I say the only honest place you can treat that is at point of use, at the house, at the apartment. And that means all the water, not just the water you drink, because if you're bathing in it like they would in a pool or a swimming or what have you, it's getting in other orifices of your body. And that amoeba doesn't care how it gets in. Once it gets in, it goes where it was going to go. And so, folks, our world is getting increasingly more dangerous. The perils are coming from various places. And depending upon the public and public things at this time may not be very wise. And so my encouragement to all of you is to continue to seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, to pray diligently to find where you belong, where you can be effective. Some of you are in a place where Elohim has blessed you with abundant resources and a safe place. You might need to open that up for others that need to come to that place, right? So this is where we are, and we're going to increasingly be there if war breaks out. If the nations go to war and there is outright war going out, this becomes the major cover for crime. This becomes I've already heard, in fact, I think Netanyahu was the one who said that Israel, or the Israelis soldiers, there'll be no war crimes, there'll be no tribunals, there'll be no war crimes tribunals. Like nothing they do will be out of bounds. They can do whatever they want when they go out there. So that's now the attitude. Think about that mentality. So they're giving people like a green light. You can just be as brutal as you want to be as wicked as you want to be, because it's war. So now it's under war, right? And so under the cover of war, anything is, all is fair in love and war. And so if this is now coming to the nations, it's going to be the big eraser. It's going to be the way that a lot of scores are settled. And in fact, we saw a report on Remnant Watch. Let me see if I can get it up and finish our report here. We saw a report that there was a concern about coming out of Mexico. Yeah, notorious cartel. Check this out, guys. This cartel put out a warning, and this was again on Remnant Watch. You can find the story. Notorious cartel hitmen in creepy Halloween mass announced a purge in a chilling video, and so they announced where they're going. Jalisco New Generation Cartel, considered Mexico's most dangerous drug trafficking organization. I sure wouldn't want to mess with these guys. They look pretty serious. Hitmen from one of Mexico's most notorious drug cartels have announced a purge in a chilling video that has emerged online. So you've got forces that are already getting ready, okay, for there to be a conflict cover so that they can then do the smaller conflicts, regional conflicts, the tribal conflicts that I believe will be emerging at the same time. So these will be indeed perilous days. Let me encourage you to find your fold, to connect together with those brothers and sisters of like heart and mind, whom you can connect with, who you can partner with, and be together with, especially as the days of trouble approach. Remember that he said, our Messiah told us, that he that endures to the end shall be saved. So make your preparations for endurance, for overcoming, for being an overcomer in this hour. That's our encouragement to every one of you. Well, thank you so much for joining us. That's the end of our report tonight. I pray that it has been a blessing to you, and I encourage you to share the links, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble. Please share the links and like and subscribe if you haven't already. We certainly appreciate it. And I want to encourage everyone to watch our latest Shabbat broadcast, which came on as that sign in the heaven appeared. So that literally was being broadcast as that sign was appearing in the heaven. And we're dealing with the root of all evil. And so this is why the dragon will attack and has been attacking. And so I strongly encourage you all to get on that YouTube channel or go on our website and take a look at that broadcast. I believe it'll bless you. We're going to be continuing on next week on that discussion. So this upcoming Shabbat, we're going to continue down that same road. There's a lot for us to uncover and a lot for us to understand. I pray this broadcast has been a blessing to you. May each and every one of you be blessed. Shalom to each and every one of your homes. Good night.